One of the biggest criticisms of EVs is how damn heavy they are. Imagine if a huge EV manufacturer made a really lightweight performance car that was well under 3,000 pounds. In this video, we're going to walk through some different lightweight variations. We're going to see their performance and run some drag races. If you're a new viewer here, welcome. I make tons of different car videos related to performance and drag racing. I go through car physics, break down different cars, compare them against each other. So sit back, enjoy the video, like, subscribe if you enjoy it. Now let's jump into the first variation. The first variation is going to be based on an Ariel Atom. If you don't know what an Ariel Atom is, it's a track-focused open cockpit car. It's extremely lightweight. It only weighs 1,350 pounds. So I'm going to err on the side of caution and make an assumption that we can put all of the EV components in and keep that 1,350 pound curb weight. All of the EV components minus the battery pack. So all we're going to add weight-wise is battery pack weight. So let's see what the weight will be. Our first variation has a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack. So this is taking the weight up to 1,790 pounds. How do we get to that number? We're using an energy density of 1 kilowatt hour per 5 kilograms. So that's comparable to modern EVs. So if you multiply the 40 kilowatt hour pack size by 5 kilograms, we get 200 kilograms. So we're adding the 200 kilograms, which is equivalent to 440 pounds roughly, to our original weight. So that's bringing us up to 812 kilograms, which is equivalent to 1,790 pounds. For power, we're using a simple ratio of 10 horsepower to 1 kilowatt hour. The Model S Plaid has 1,020 horsepower. It has a 100 kilowatt hour battery pack. So we're using those exact same proportions. And we're also using the power curve that is found in the Model S Plaid. So let's see how this rear wheel drive EV Atom does in a drag race. I've set up a quarter mile drag race with this thing. So it's the 40 kilowatt hour battery pack, 1,790 curb weight. Rear wheel drive, we can see a really fast 0 to 60 time, 2.4 seconds with 1 foot rollout subtracted. We're getting about 290 kilowatts of power going to the rear axle and a sub 10-second quarter mile, so 9.96 at almost 140 miles an hour. The next variation has a bigger battery pack at 60 kilowatt hours. This is pushing our weight up to 2,010 pounds. I'll put the math on the screen like I did earlier for how we get to that curb weight. I'm using the same 10 horsepower per kilowatt hour ratio. So this is a 600 horsepower variation. Again, rear wheel drive. We're not adding weight for a front motor. So this is all going to be in the rear. Let's see how fast it is. So I've set up the quarter mile race. It's going to be on a street surface. Again, we're seeing traction limitations. So the exact same 0 to 60 at 2.4 seconds with 1 foot rollout subtracted, but it's going to be pulling a lot harder at higher speeds. And we see 9.4 at 154 miles an hour in the quarter mile. If you're thinking, hey, a 40 kilowatt hour battery pack is tiny, this thing's not going to have any range, how would this work? You take it to a track, you can only run it a few times, it runs out of power. Well, despite 40 kilowatt hours being a small pack, this thing would charge really fast, and because the car is so light, it's really not going to use as much power as you'd think. In the simulation, this thing is only using 12 kilowatts at 50 miles an hour, steady speed. So in theory, this could have about 170 mile range at 50 miles an hour. The 60 kilowatt hour version, similar idea. It carries a little bit more weight, but it's only using 17 kilowatts at 50 miles an hour. So this thing would have closer to a 200 mile range, and the packs are so small that if there's fast charging wherever you're driving it hard, it could charge up pretty quickly and it wouldn't be as big of a burden as you may think. So this is a great starting point, but it's kind of extreme. We're basically taking the most extreme street car that you'd probably only find around a track and making it an EV. Let's jump to a car with actual body panels that has a dual motor setup, weighs a little more, and let's see what kind of performance we can get out of it. So these next variations we're going to base on the original Tesla Roadster. This car weighed about 2,700 pounds. We're using the 2010 model, which had a 53 kilowatt hour battery pack. So what we're going to do is take the weight of the car, 2,723 pounds. We're going to subtract the weight of the battery pack, which is 990 pounds. We're going to add a couple hundred pounds for a front motor and front motor components. And then we're just going to add battery pack weight to that. So I'll put the math on the screen. It might sound complicated, but I'll hopefully make it clear on the screen. Another way to think about this variation is we're simply adding a motor to the front of the original Roadster and replacing that old, not as energy dense battery pack with a new, much more energy dense battery pack. Our final weight comes out to 2,535 pounds. Okay, so I have the Roadster set up in a quarter mile drag race on the street. This is the dual motor setup with 500 horsepower because we have a 50 kilowatt hour battery pack. We see 2.5 0 to 60 with 1 foot rollout subtracted, and it keeps pulling through the quarter. So we see right at 10 seconds at 141 miles an hour. This car is ridiculously fast. Let's jump to a bigger battery pack, higher powered version. You know the drill. I'll put the math on the screen on how we arrive at this weight, but we come out with a 2,866 pound curb weight for an 80 kilowatt hour pack. We're using 800 horsepower, 775 foot-pounds of torque in this thing. So it's that 1 kilowatt hour to 10 horsepower ratio. I'm using the torque to horsepower ratio of a Model S Plaid and the power curve of a Model S Plaid. All right, this thing should be pretty damn fast. So 800 horsepower, 2,800 pound curb weight, all-wheel drive. So we see 2 seconds 0 to 60. It is struggling for traction, so that's traction limited. And it keeps pulling through the quarter, and we get an 8-second quarter mile at 160 miles an hour. This video basically shows the opposite strategy that Tesla's taken. They have not cared as much about weight, and they've kept putting power in cars. But in the future, as energy density gets better in these battery packs, as more EV makers come to the market, there will be lightweight variations that are very performance oriented and maybe track oriented. This goes to show how crazy the performance can be if you pull out weight instead of just throwing in a ton of power. But if you do both, it gets even crazier. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you learned something from this, and I hope the math was simple enough and realistic enough. Anyways, like the video, subscribe. I'll see you guys next time.